Welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs.
Welcome back to the Your Family Dog podcast. I'm your host, Tina Spring, and today I'm joined by my smart and pretty co-host, Julie Fudge Smith. And in the light of the situation with Hurricane Helene, first and foremost, we want to say that our prayers and our hearts are with all of the families that are struggling and suffering, and that we're watching in disbelief, just like the rest of the world, that this is all going on and that it's so awful. I personally have had a bunch of calls and texts and emails from customers saying, what can we do to help in all these different areas? And we'll probably talk about that a little bit today as well. But what we decided, Julie and I decided that it would be timely to discuss disaster preparedness with your pet. And being able to navigate what do we do if we need to evacuate and there's a natural disaster? Because it seems like that becomes a real issue when families are asked to evacuate, that they're not really sure how to do that with their animals, and they don't want to turn them over to a shelter. So, with no further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Julie, and she can start the first part of the conversation.
All right. Well, thank you, Tina. And yes, I too wanted to say that we have been watching with a great deal of concern over what's been going on from Helene. And Tina and I were both very lucky not to have been too terribly affected by Helene. That's just a happenstance of geography. But one of the things we wanted to do was talk about if you need to evacuate quickly from an area due to any kind of natural disaster. Tornadoes would be the one around here. We get a fair number of tornadoes. We wanted you to be ready to move out quickly and to be able to take your dog with you. So one of the things that we were talking before the show, I had told Tina that, Noble Foods, that they have a lovely freeze-dried bar, which is really dense in nutrition and would be a super thing to have in any kind of a rescue pack for your dog. One time sent me a backpack that was filled with bars and treats and a first aid kit and a leash and a collar and a bowl and all kinds of things. And then Clementine found it, of course, and chewed through it. But nonetheless, that was something I was thinking about that I would really need to put together again. And I have an extra backpack, so I'm just thinking about it. So what would I put into my, animal preparedness? Make sure that I have everything that I need for my dogs. So I was thinking, first and foremost, I would probably be thinking in terms of food bars. And Tina had mentioned the idea of dehydrated bars that are lightweight but dense in nutrition, and that's really important. And we would both, I think, really recommend the Noble food bars because they're lightweight.
Yeah. Yes.
Dense.
So there are some real advantages if somebody is trying to donate to the disaster relief and to try to get great supplies to the people and the animals in the affected areas. Freeze-dried raw is a really great way to do this. Because its digestibility is so much higher, animals don't need to eat as much, and it's clean, right? It doesn't have a whole bunch of filler in it. So the higher metabolized energy per cup is a real win. It also tends not to upset dogs' stomachs transitioning to it. So you're not then worried that an animal that's been stressed by a major disaster is then struggling with, like, I have the trots because they switched my food cold turkey. Additionally, it can be fed dry or wet, so they can add bottled water to it if they wanted to. And it's light. So if it's having to be packed into helicopters, like we're seeing in Tennessee and Asheville, in North Carolina, I don't know if they're doing helicopter drops in Augusta at this point. I don't think so, but they might be. anytime we can transport by plane, weight matters. So if you just think about the space that a giant bag of dog food that you pick up at a big box store weighs and the amount of space that takes up, you can really get a much greater option for the people that you're trying to help and the animals you're trying to help by doing freeze-dried raw. And that's true whether it's for cat or dog. So both of those, it's a really solid way to really help because it's not heavy, it's super clean, it's very digestible, and so it oddly lasts longer, which is kind of an awesome thing too.
So you don't have to, so when you're making your emergency preparedness package, you don't have to worry about the food expiring as soon as it would if you were using other food. So you can pack dense nutrition. So that would be one of the first things I'd put in there. I would put in a leash for each of my pets, a collar for each of my pets, probably a pet first aid kit. I would also put in maybe a couple of toys, just something soft that, if I know my dogs love a particular toy, so that they can have something to hold on to. Both my spaniel and my retriever love to hold things. So I'd probably put in a small toy for each one of them. You might think about a lightweight blanket, something that can retain heat, but doesn't weigh a lot, like an emergency blanket. The other thing I think is just super important is if your dog is on medication. Zuzu is on Pimobentin, which is a heart disease medication. So I'd make sure that I have at least a week's, and that's Zuzu in the background, would have a week's supply of her Pimobentin in the pack. The other thing is you might want to make sure that you have copies of all the important information that your dog has, such as the name and telephone number of your vet, vaccine certificates, any medical information that you think is important to have about your dog would be important to put in there. There's a great little article on Paul Raid on exactly creating a how to make a pet disaster preparedness plan, and I will put that on the website. But one of the things that they suggest you put in there is a certificate of sale or registration proving your animal belongs to you, a picture of you and your family with your pet, your latest health certificate, a microchip information, medication prescriptions, veterinary office, boarding facility clearance, training certifications, if any, letters from doctors or emotional support animals, any other critical information that you think would be important for somebody to know about your dog. Put that in your emergency supply list. And then be smarter than I do and hang it where the dog can't get it. So we're not getting into the backpack. So that would be one of the things that I would recommend is thinking about putting together an emergency preparedness backpack. The problem with that, which is what I find with for me anyway, with most of this emergency preparedness stuff, is if I don't use it, then I have to put in, I have to every 6 months or however long, I need to, restock, pull out the old food, put in new food, get it out before it expires, medication out before it expires. So one of the things you might want to do is wherever you're hanging the backpack is just clip a card on it that just says date it needs to be, refurbished. So, and then put it on your calendar as well. So if you're going to do that every 3 months, every 6 months, just make sure it's on your calendar as a reminder, and then as a little tag hanging off of the backpack as well. One of the things that we need to remember, I think, about these emergency situations is they are traumatic for us and for our animals. So the most that we can do to make this less traumatic, the better. So if you've got this in place and you've got your emergency phone numbers in place, then you have a plan. Create a plan on how you're going to get out and how you're going to get out with your pets. So I think that if you spend some time putting together this pack and putting together a plan as to where you're going to go or how you're going to get out, what you're going to find is that when you have to implement this plan, then it's not going to be nearly so serious because you're not going to be running around going, oh my gosh, where is this? Where is that? This at least will have one part of the plan in place, which will take that pressure off you and your dog. One of the other things that they recommend that you do in paw raid is practice an emergency evacuation. So I think that that's kind of cool. That's a great idea, is to practice what you're going to do. It's kind of like when we lived in Granville, my daughter's room was on the 3rd floor of our Victorian home, and there was only one staircase up. So we actually got her an emergency ladder that she could hang out the front window, and she could climb down the ladder and get to the roof of the porch and go from there. It wouldn't go all the way to the ground, but we could get her to a point where she could jump and be in safely, either land in the bushes or she'd be on the roof and could slide down the roof and off into the front yard. But one of the things I insisted that she do is practice going in and out of the window with the ladder, so that if the time came that she had to use it, which it never did come, it wouldn't be her very first time. The last thing I wanted to do was have her stuck on the 3rd floor of our Victorian home with the means of getting out and not having the courage or the muscle memory to know how to do it. So I think that the more you practice these kinds of things, the more you are able to make sure that this can be well executed and that your dog understands what's going on. So running through potential scenarios will help you and your pet know what to expect and expose any flaws in your plan. Because of course, there's always flaws in plans, aren't there? I think it was one general was asked, "Oh, when do you change your battle plan?" And he said, "After the first shot's fired." So I think it's important to plan these things. One thing I would also say too, why I also think it's really important to practice. We had some friends when we were living in Virginia, and they had, let me see, was it 9 kids, and they had a fire, but and their house was burned to the ground, absolutely torched to the ground. There was nothing left, but everybody got out alive because they had an emergency evacuation plan that they had practiced. And so that was a real awakening for me, which is one of the reasons why we did it when we moved to Granville after Virginia. Why we did that with Emma was because I realized practice does give you a much better opportunity for survival. So practice.
Right. And to be fair, like, I don't have go bags packed for Christopher and I, much less for 5 animals. And it's something I need to think about.
No, I don't either, which I'm thinking I need to.
So the pounding that Augusta got, we were supposed to get. So when you see those videos of people who can't get out of their neighborhood now, almost a week later, that's how Athens was supposed to be. Thank goodness the storm that's following Helene is not nearly as serious, right? It's going to be a little bit of rain and that's it. It's going to be an inconvenience more than anything else. Over the weekend, Christopher and I were in Charlotte. We were 140 miles away from Asheville. People were getting into fistfights for gasoline. It's the devastation, the little bit that we saw, because obviously we're not going to go close to an area that's been seriously impacted. We don't want to clog up the roads or take up fuel that somebody else needs. We thought for sure being in Charlotte, we'd be safely far enough away that things would be okay. And they're not. There's sections of Greenville that people can't get out of yet. So I think this was a big wake up call, even for Christopher and I, that, we're probably going to be putting a generator in, not one of those big expensive whole house ones, but one that can run the fridge and that can run an outlet or two. And that we could run a small window air conditioner or a small heater if we needed to. Because this, I think about Boone that's on top of a mountain, that they're doing mule trains and helicopter lifts to get people in and out and to get insulin up on the mountain for people. They're on top of a mountain. Who would have thought?
Right. Well, when we
roads, like, they don't have water, and roads and bridges are washed out completely. So I think it's awful. The amount of suffering is awful. It is truly a gigantic catastrophe in so many places that I think services are running probably a little bit thin. And so it just brings top of mind that I need to plan a little bit better. Whether it's, my next shipment of Noble, I decide to stash and do a bag for each animal and just have it in a bin ready to go. Have some MREs in a bin ready to go so that we can be a little bit more resilient on our own.
Right. When we lived in Virginia, Hurricane Isabel came through. This was back in 2004, I think, 2003, 2004. And we lived on a very small road, little dead end street off of Route 3. And we lost our power. But because we were on such a tiny little road, we didn't get power back for 10 days. And so one of the things that Fredericksburg did was they got their facilities for their pool, the recreation facilities up, so you could go and you could shower there. And I had friends who got power back and they let me come over and shower there. But we were doing things like we were on a creek. So we would go down and we get buckets of water from the creek to flush the toilets with and stuff like that. So, we ate really, really well the first few days because, of course, everything in the freezer had to be cooked. So I learned how to cook really on some amazing number of things on a backpacking stove and the grill. But we were lucky we could stay where we were, but you would think that would have driven home to me what we needed to do. Anyway, so I've had a little bit of an experience with a hurricane, but certainly nothing like what they are experiencing now. We just lost power. So
you just lost power there?
No, in Virginia.
Got it. You can understand. I've got people every day going, and we just lost power.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And we had a tornado go through, just down my road in March, missed my house completely, although it took a couple of big limbs off. But two farms down took out a couple of barns. So stuff like this can happen really quickly. And
right.
Luckily we had a great pet sitter who went and got a generator and chainsaw and went to town.
And for example, like on Thursday, I made sure I had 2 giant crates in the car because worst come to worst, I can put Doberman and the Jack Russell in one crate. I could put the 2 potcakes in the other crate. They don't argue with each other. And I could put the cat in a crate and we're good. It's not ideal. In a perfect world, I'd have all 5 crates in the car. They don't fit. And definitely not if Christopher and I were going to grab go bags and food and water for everybody and all that stuff. Now, I will say, if you think about people who hunt and camp, they're very efficient about packing and they're very efficient about the things that'll kill you. So getting like camping water filtration system so that you can create clean water wherever you are is a complete win. And it's worth the investment to be able to do if you end up getting cut off from the world, whether it's your car breaks down in the middle of nowhere or whether it's, trees fall all around you and now you're stuck. So this was really, I think for many of us, this was kind of a big wake-up call that sometimes there are situations that are just bigger than we could have imagined and prepared for. So any bit of preparedness we have done is done.
Well, one of the things I was going to say when you mentioned that, I had a water purification pumping system for when we were camping, but it got kind of old and it really needed a new filter. And because it was old, finding a filter for it was almost impossible. So I ended up getting an ultraviolet light pen that you can use to purify your water. And what's really nice about that is it's small and it can even go in your pocket. So that, you want to start thinking about minimizing the amount of space and stuff you take. I would definitely take a look at the ultraviolet light pens for purifying water because it's quick and easy. It really does work. And I've taken it overseas. I've traveled all over the place with it. And it's a really handy little thing to have. So
right. And I would say also, remember that your dogs can wear packs and be responsible for carrying some of their food and water. So this, even if you're just going on a day hike, like they tell people, even if you're out for a day hike and you think there's no chance of getting lost, you can get lost. So having some survival gear is important. The same's true for your pet.
Right. I remember when that happened to one of my daughters. I think I might have told the story. She and her husband she went to Colorado with they went to Colorado with their in-laws and her two brother-in-laws who had never been backpacking. So her father-in-law and Emma had been backpacking several times with us, said, well, we'll take you backpacking. So they got everybody loaded up and they were just going to go out one night, mind you. And her father-in-law, Travis, he's a great fisherman. He was planning on catching some fish in the river, and he even took a cast iron skillet, which I'm like, who takes it? Because he was going to be out one night. You don't trek a long ways with a cast iron skillet, so you could cook it properly. Somebody had gone out and taken down the trail signs, and they got lost for 2 days. And they had, they had no idea where they were. They had to kind of bushwhack their way back to, to the river. The river was starting to rise. At one point, they had to cross the river. They made a human chain. Emma's feet couldn't even touch the river, was surging so much. And luckily, when they had gone, I said, look, I have this backpacking food that it needs to be used up. So just take these 6 or packets or whatever, because I'm not going to get to them. And you never know. You're going with 2, you're going to have 4 men. You're going to need extra food. And thank goodness they did. And then Travis did catch the biggest fish he's ever caught in his life and was able to feed them, and they got out okay. But yeah, stuff can happen so quickly, so very quickly.
Well, and the emergency preparedness food for people is often rated for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's in a bin, you stick it in the attic, or you stick it in the closet, or you stick it, under a bed, and you don't worry about it. Use it up in 25 years. If you don't need it in 25 years, throw an MRE party. Cook it all up for everyone. Like, do taste testing and decide what flavors you like. Right. So there's just a little bit of, what are the things you need when you're panicked and like, okay, some of the people in Asheville didn't get any warning. They got minutes of warning, or their house just started filling with water. It's bad. I was watching a video today of people in Hendersonville. There's probably 15 people in a house, and they're in water up to their chests. And only one of the people is saying, well, and the lights are on in the house, which is terrifying to me anyway, because water and electricity are not best friends. But they're
very volatile friends. Let's put it that way.
Right. And so only one of the people was like, okay, this is dangerous. We need to get out. We need a plan.
Wow.
So don't wait. Don't wait until, I have a fire blanket. Does that seem weird? Yes. Does it look awkward in my kitchen as part of my decor? Yes. If I can put out my kitchen in the case of a fire. I lost my grandparents, one set of grandparents, to a house fire, basically. Being able to put out a fire quickly is a win.
Yeah.
Having a copy of your animal's vet records uploaded to a cloud that you can access, but also carrying a printed copy when you need it is a win.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, having them microchipped, right? I'm looking at all these animals being found that nobody knows who they belong to. And ideally, we want to get them back to their families.
Right. And let me also too, there's a fallacy about microchips that many people, they figure, well, once a dog's microchipped, that's it. But that's not it. You have to register the microchip with a service. And that's really important. And I know this because of all of Zuzu's escape attempts. And the one time I must have said, she turned herself in at the fire department. Anyway,
she's like, there's no tacos. I don't even know where tacos grow.
It's just like, excuse me, can you help me? Because I might be
Tuesday. I'm missing.
Anyway. So, but I got an alert from Home Again because, I think it's Home Again, that my dog was at the fire department or whatever she's been found. And microchipping is just the first step. If you don't register it with the service, they can scan the microchip and get the number, but that's not going to get your dog home to you. So microchip
and microchips wear out, they break, and they migrate. So every year when you take your dog in for their annual, have your vet check and make sure that that microchip is where it's supposed to be and it's functioning well. And replace it if necessary.
Right. What I was going to say is that people say, well, I have all her ID tags on her collar. Well, the one with one of the ones when Zuzu, we had her, she was in the backyard on a tether. Ellie and John were home. They were watching them, supposedly. Brad and I were going to the hardware store, to the Home Depot, to look at fencing, right? To replace the fencing we had to get better fencing in the backyard, right? And she slips her collar, jumps the fence, right? Trying to find me.
Well, and then there's Clementine trying to climb out the windows.
No, that was Zuzu. Zuzu actually ran out the windows, but Clementine did stick her head out going, hello. But so your dog can slip their collar, or we were out at a cottage. I looked at Zuzu's collars and I'm like, where is your tags? And I found her tags here in one of my gardens that got caught on something. So, I mean, tags can come off, collars can come off, but microchips are a lot safer bet in the long run. So Zuzu's covered by, I think she's got 3 different tags. She's got like her ID tag and her home again tag and her rabies tag and her license. I don't know if in Georgia, but here in Ohio, if your dog is licensed, that's when they check Zuzu's license on one of her many escape attempts. And they brought her home in the paddy wagon, but didn't charge us for it because she was such a nice dog. So she seems to have stopped trying to escape, though. I think we're finally settled. But I think she panics about where I am. I think that's what's going on with her. But
maybe.
Anyway, needless to say, this is a very long and involved and probably somewhat boring discussion of why you need to have your dog microchipped and register the microchip, because it will make a difference.
So you do want up-to-date photos of you and your pet, ideally, so you can prove ownership. Yes. Having toys and bedding packed for them, which I know sounds kind of nutty, but can be a big, huge help. In the case of cats, right, we get into much more difficult stuff. You've got to have a litter box. You have to have litter. You need sanitation supplies, whether it's for a dog or a cat, shampoo, conditioner, grooming equipment that you may need if you're displaced for an extended period of time, or like in this case where it's so muddy, packing a little bit of your dog shampoo and conditioner, even just using the little travel bottles like we use when we travel, is a big win. And I'm not sure that any of that expires. A groomer probably could speak more to that. And then also having an action plan. So some sort of, where are we headed? And think about that now, right? In Georgia, our hurricanes are either going to come from the south or from the east. So we can start thinking in terms, they're going to come north from the south, like Helene did, or they're going to come laterally. So knowing which direction things are coming from and where we might want to head and what we're going to do with all these crazy Guggenheim animals is like a really important piece. And I don't know what people do with horses, right? With livestock. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to leave them. And I will say that there are a lot of farms here in Athens who, during evacuations in Florida, open up their farms to other people who own horses. I'm pretty sure that happens all over the US. So networking with other people who have the kinds of animals you have. If you have birds, I don't even know what you pack for birds, but that's something or lizards, right? If you have a fish tank, I don't know what you do.
Yes, that's really tough stuff, but that's the kind of thing that you need to be thinking about and finding out, is there a network for, fish rescue or ferret rescue or, whatever. What does your particular pet need and how do you provide for it in an emergency?
Yes. And then maybe even having it in a tote or a bin, or, I mean, I don't know. I suppose you could move fish that way.
They get
I don't know.
seasick.
It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to
It's a
think
lot.
about. So we're just asking you to not imperil yourself and not imperil your pets. And in the future, like, evacuate, take the safer route. I have clients in Florida who loaded their family and their 2 dogs up in their RV. Their house was completely destroyed in the Tampa St. Pete area, and they'll be rebuilding, but they're living in an RV for a while. So being able to get to where it was safe and to have a plan for how to do that, I just love that they had done that already, that they could, not that the loss isn't devastating, because of course it is, but being able to say, okay, well, we have our family intact, even though it's a less than ideal situation, I imagine is a big relief.
Yes, because I imagine for many of the people who, in Katrina was the classic example of the number of people, the number of animals that had to be abandoned, and people who refused to abandon their animals who died along with their animals. And I could imagine the guilt you would feel if you left, you were forced to leave, and you couldn't take your pet. That would weigh very, very heavily on you. And I know it would weigh quite heavily on me. So in order to avoid that, we're asking you to just take a few minutes and consider what you can do to perhaps prevent that kind of a situation from happening. Because it also depends too. I mean, like hurricanes are just not a big threat here in Ohio, but tornadoes are. And so, what do you do? And oftentimes you don't have a lot of warning with tornadoes. They can come up pretty quickly. And
Well, and I mean, I think about Helene. Helene was still a tropical storm when it hit Nashville.
yeah,
I mean, it was still a hurricane in Valdosta. Like,
yeah.
Georgia, especially where I am in Georgia or middle Georgia, is not used to still having something be a hurricane when it hits us. So it's just one of those things to consider, that, our weather can be
Well, we
odd.
did get the tail end of Helene. She come through. Yeah, well, like I said, we got the tail end of Helene on Friday. The wind and the rain around here was just crazy. So I just was like, wow, which in some ways it was nice to get rain because we were in a drought.
Right. I mean,
We
poor
didn't need
North Carolina, the poor Appalachians got rain exactly where they didn't need it. They were already flooding.
Yeah, well, it was kind of like, okay, yes, we do need rain. We don't need all of the rain we needed for the summer in one day or 2 days, but it was still good to get the rain. So the grass started looking green again and stuff. But anyway, anything else you want to add to this? Because I think we pretty much covered it. What I will do is I will put a link on the website to the Chewy.com has a wide variety, as I mentioned earlier, of pet evacuation packs for cats, dogs, anywhere from a really simple first aid kit with a few supplies up to one that's for 2 big dogs. So you can get anything in between there from $24.99 to $121.07. I think they also have them on Amazon. I'll put a link there if I find it as well. And then the article that I had mentioned on Paw Raid, I will give a link to that as well. So it gives you some great hints on how to get prepared. And I think there might be some in the Whole Dog Journal. I'll take a look for those too and see if we can come up with
And we may want to, if there's something we've missed that you the listener think of, jump in.
Yes.
Let us know, right? I think Katrina taught us a lot about people won't evacuate if they can't take their pets. So lots of rescues stepped up and decided to have a disaster response team that was for pets. I think this one's going to do something similar, right? It's going to change how we all view how things can happen and how quickly.
Yes.
So, making sure that we can safely move the animals we have, because in the end, my house is stuff. It's stuff I love, but it's stuff.
Yeah.
to lose animals or to lose Christopher or any other member of my family would be devastating. And I would hate to have anyone have to face that. And my dogs, my cat are absolutely members of my family. Likewise, I'm boarding some dogs. So I also, as someone who takes care of other people's animals, have to have a plan for what I'm going to do if we're evacuated with those other animals, because I have a responsibility, obviously, to them as well.
Right. Right. The other thing I was going to say is if you are interested, Tina and I are going to be making a donation to IFAW, which is the International Fund for Animal Welfare, in order to aid them in their help for rescuing animals from emergency situations. I will put a link to their site as well if you're interested in making a donation to help animals be rescued from disasters. So there is that too. And other than that, I guess thank you so much for listening to Your Family Dog. Let us know if you have any suggestions or questions or ideas for guests that we might have on. You can get a hold of us at Your Family Dog Podcast at iCloud.com. So thanks.
And everybody, stay safe. Help your neighbors. I wish it didn't take major disasters like this for us to remember that we're all in this together. And to just help one another, regardless of whether you're a cat person or a dog person or somebody who believes this or that or whatever. I wish it didn't take major catastrophes and incredible suffering for us to remember that we are all in this life together. We are all supposed to help one another and care about one another. It shouldn't take a mess like this to remind us. But sadly, I think it kind of always does.
Well, at least we get the reminder. You know,
We do.
every once in a while you get sort of every once in a while I guess you just got to poke the bear, man, in order to get woken up. But all right, well, thanks
to be
again.
reminded.
Yeah, to be reminded.
So for any of you that are in the affected areas, know that our hearts are with you. Our prayers are with you. We're donating. I'm trying to disseminate information as best I can to try to get, we have a lot of friends in a lot of different areas. So when I see a place post like, hey, we're feeding everyone for free this day, I post it on my social media in the hopes that it can get to at least one person who can take advantage of it. Hug a first responder, buy them lunch, offer to do their laundry, just love the first responders in your area. Just love them. It's the linemen out there, the EMTs and paramedics, the fire department, everybody. They're all working so hard to try to take care of all of us. So let's try to make their life easy and make that happen.
All right. Well, thanks. And see you next time on Your Family Dog.
Thanks for listening to Your Family Dog. Got questions? Interesting ideas? Visit www.yourfamilydogpodcast.com to share your thoughts.